Today, I want to show you how I use Eve Guru to make myself billions of ISK every single week. Hey there, Croven here for the Drone Bay, and a few weeks ago I did a video about introducing folks to Eve Guru and promoting it as a tool that I use to make an awful lot of ISK in Eve Online. And I did have some requests from people to kind of take a look at what that process exactly looks like for me. So that's what we're going to do today. And I guess to get started, there were a couple of folks who were a little skeptical of the ability of Eve Guru to do what I claim that it does. And in order to answer that, I'm going to show you something. This is my Eve Tycoon dashboard. Now, one thing Eve Guru does not currently do is track profits and that sort of thing the way that Eve Tycoon does. That is a feature they're planning on adding, but as of right now, it's just not there. So here is my last 30 days. So you see a total net profit of over 40 billion ISK. And in fairness, not all of that is trade. So just under 34 billion of that is trade. There's some manufacturing in there, which Guru also helps me with a bit. And then contracts. The contracts are mostly research blueprints that I sell in Jita. So we can really discount that. And a good chunk of the manufacturing, because a lot of that manufacturing is converting loyalty points and building faction ships and stuff. But the trade, that is almost entirely all Eve Guru. So billions and billions a week. So here we are back in the Eve Guru UI. This is what you're presented with in the regional day trader. And as you can see, I've just updated my ESI. My order books are up to date. So we're ready to start looking. Now, what am I looking for? So here is, we're going to look for things to move from the Forge, so Jita basically, to Amar, the second largest trade home in the game. What are the parameters I want? Well, you can mess with all that here. You can mess with the overall minimum item profit. So this is the item profit calculated based on the number of units that Guru is going to tell you to buy. This is actually probably too low for Amar. I mostly use it for things like Heck and Rens, and then some of the off trade hubs that I use, which you can add your own custom hubs too. So you can see I've got Tar and Valor, Aishi, some of the higher volume non quote unquote hub systems. Now we can look at risk profile. So what this does is this it'll give you a return on investment for the current price differential between wherever you're buying and wherever you're selling. I believe by default it is 14 days, but you can adjust that up or down. You can also adjust the minimum period ROI. So it'll give me the return on investment price for what's happening right this minute in Eve, but what's my risk tolerance? How much am I willing to potentially lose if the prices revert to what they've been for the past 2 weeks? So I set that at minus 12%. You can set it to whatever you want. You can turn it off entirely. All of that is on the table for you. I like 14 days. It can get a little wonky around some events and things. So, your mileage may vary and based on your ISK position and your risk tolerance. My assets and orders. This just, when you populate this, it's going to show you what your current assets are and how many orders you have. So you can have it to be whatever current trade alt you're looking at, your current corporation, or just show you nothing, which, yeah, I wouldn't do. And then shipping. So I think the base assumption on the part of the makers of Eve Guru, is that you're going to be moving this stuff yourself. I don't, and I'm going to get into that. But I also don't use this calculator because this is just based on ISK per cubic meter that you're paying, which you can. I mean, you can calculate that each time. But what I'm going to show you, I think, is a little bit simpler. So that's some of the basics out of the way. So let's go ahead, and you can also use in transit. I tend not to, but you can. So let's update opportunities for Amar and see what we have. And so I've already loaded this once today, and that's why it's going pretty quick. The first time you do it in a day, especially if you haven't updated your ESI in a little while, it can take a couple minutes sometimes. So here we go. So this is checking every system in the forge and for items that we want to sell potentially in Amar. So you can, I mean, you could go to Perimeter and, you could grab an Odysseus. Oh, wow. Odysseus is 4.2 billion in Amar right now. Interesting. Um, so yeah, so that's just an interesting outlier there. All right, let's take a look at Jita though. That's wow. Okay, yeah. So the Odysseus price, this is interesting to me because, the Odysseus price kind of tanked. They were very overproduced early on, and I kind of suspected that the price would recover as that initial glut got sold because of the amount of Sisters of Eve LP it requires. So that's very interesting. But I'm for Amar specifically, I tend not to sell ships, and I'll explain why here in a minute. So here's some of the things that we have on offer. When you hit this, Guru will tell you, here, let's change the size of this window here so we can see more. So, okay, 5 Odysseus's. This is based on a few things. So the target demand per day, so on average, about 4.4 sell per day in Amar. There are 6 currently on the market, so there's 1.4 days of supply. So the market's the market is in a bit of a supply crunch, which probably explains this pretty dramatic price change. So it says, okay, if you buy 5 Odysseus's and you move them to Amar, you're going to pay, or well, you're going to profit potentially 6 billion ISK. And then even over the 14-day period, you're still not at much risk because you're still getting a 13% ROI on the 14-day period price. You're going to need a freighter to do it, and man, would that freighter be some gank bait. But so that's kind of what we're looking at. I'm not going to take this deal for a variety of reasons, volume being a big one. Initial capital is not insubstantial. You're shelling out over 14 billion to get into this deal. So when I look at these things, actually, you know what? Let's go to one that I am probably going to buy. Large core defense field extenders. I think I am going to take this one. Well, actually, let's look. Minus 2.3, so that's well within my risk tolerance. So let's click large core defense field extender 2. So that's a pretty juicy potential profit here. You're looking at 30 million basically per unit. So what happens when you click this is if you go over to the shopping list, it'll say, okay, because it defaults to buying a full day of supply. So then it populates this list here. There we go. And that's what we're buying. Oh, here we go. Pitham C-type medium shield booster. So people use these on Abyssal Helas a lot. I think the Povertila, which is one of the more popular Abyss running ships, once you start to upgrade that, one of the first things you do is you get Pitham C-types. So that could be, these are going to move. As you can see, almost 17 of them sell per day. So, and it's a good margin, 20 million per unit. Period ROI isn't great, but that's another reason I would not go for a full day of supply because I want to try to hit this while it's hot. Outrider, that's not terribly surprising. It's a new ship. Neurotoxin recovery, skill books. There are some skill books I'll go for, but for the most part, I don't. The numbers I showed you earlier are, it's a question of scale, right? Economies of scale. When I first started doing this with Guru about a month and a half ago now, I was putting in maybe 3 to 4 billion a day in buy orders, or not in buy orders, but in things that I'm buying to move and sell. And now it's been so successful for me. Now that number is closer to 12 to 15 billion per day. So bear in mind that everything I'm showing you and telling you here is based on your initial capital position. So yeah, just take that for what it is. Mining Form and MineLink, these have been really good. since the Catalyst expansion dropped because a lot more people are mining right now. So great. Mining form and burst. That's hmm. That's kind of interesting actually. The price, you can see how the price has fluctuated since at the very beginning there were a few things. So mining form and burst, and then what used to be survey scanners, but are now the mining something chipsets, mining array chipsets. Anyway, they spiked because they got some significant changes that make them a lot better, especially the survey scanners. But now, again, because these are not difficult to make, the market is catching back up. Tholos. I don't generally. So the reason I avoid ships largely is because a lot of the time what I'm trying to do is get a load that's going to fit into a blockade runner. So that is max like 12,000 M3. And a frigate is 2,500. Destroyers tend to be 5,000. Cruisers 10,000, etc., etc. That's another reason, because the Odysseus, even fully packaged, I think is 25,000 cubic meters. So you're looking at a DST there, and that's going to slow you down. Medium thermal shield reinforcer, pretty useful in a Mars space. Well, even the period ROI is decent. So what's happening a lot of the time when you're doing regional day trading is your stuff often isn't going to sell in a single day despite the name, no matter how much you update it to beat undercutters. So that's where the period ROI really starts to come in. And this is decent. It's not bad at all. So, yeah, maybe we do pick up some of those. So this is another interesting one where having broader knowledge of what's happening in the game in general can be useful. So sentient drone stuff, there's probably been a bit of a supply crunch on that since the drone lands recently got depopulated and are currently in the process of being repopulated. So, but still, I think I'll pass. I think I've got enough good stuff here. So one thing that I like to do, as you might be able to tell, is I cast as a pretty wide net. Total cost, about 12 billion. Now, my main G to trade character has that, but I'm not going to spend that in a single day. So we're going to go to copy for multi-buy. So you right click on your shopping list, copy for multi-buy, G to 4 Moon 4 Caldari Navy Assembly Plant. Now let's go to the web browser. So here we are on Janus. Janus is a very popular appraisal tool that's used throughout EVE Online. So we're going to copy everything we just pulled, or we're going to paste rather, everything we just copied from EVE Guru into here, and we're going to tell Janus to evaluate it. So what we can do then is come down to, I like to make adjustments down here. Something interesting has happened here. In the time since I updated my ESI like 15 minutes ago, large transverse bulkheads went from like 20-something million apiece in JITA to 86. So we're going to not do that. And now we're going to talk about how we move this. So actually, my Amar stuff, I move slightly differently now than I do everything else. And we're looking specifically at Hauler's chat. Or Hauler's channel, rather. As you can see, this is a pretty decently populated channel, and literally most of what happens in here, well, there's some chat, but most of it is people posting public courier contracts. I do not haul this stuff myself. And I know for some people they like doing it. It's part of their gameplay, and more power to them. So what we do is we want to set up a contract. So to do that, in the MOTD for the Haulers channel, there is a link to this, the base rate calculator. And this is their suggested pricing for what to put as a reward based on your collateral and how many jumps you're taking. What they suggest you pay is 1 million ISK, per 1 billion of collateral per jump. And so we'll get to what that means in a minute. But like if I were to plug that in for Amar, it assumes the assumption is all high sec, right? You do need to take the zeros off after the decimal or else it gets weird. So for Amar, 45 jumps, $3 billion in collateral. It was about 1,500 cubic meters. Yeah, it's going to tell me to pay 155 million ISK. I'm not going to do that. I am going to pay well, but I'm not going to pay that. But a lot of the people making this trip, especially in blockade runners, they might have high grade ascendancies. They might be taking low sec shortcuts. But I still like to pay them generously because there's either extra investment or extra risk involved in a pilot doing that. So I'm going to set up the private contract for this, and then we'll come back and do the same thing for Dodixie. And I'll show you how it's different in a slightly smaller hub. Okay, so we've set up our Amar trade, my contract. And by the way, the person that I privately contract to take my stuff to Amar now, I got in touch with because this person had accepted a lot of my Amar contracts through the haulers channel. And I reached out directly and said, hey, I do this basically every day. You have been fast and reliable. So would you like me to, would you like to be able to skip the line as far as the public contracts go? And I'll just offer it straight to you because I know you'll get it done quickly. And speed is important here. And we'll talk a little bit about that when I set up the public contract for Dodixie. All right, so we've switched to Dodixie. I've switched to my Dodixie trade character. I have one in every major hub and some of the smaller ones. All right, so here we're going to update. And we're going to remember the large transverse bulkheads are funky right now until I'm able to update the ESI again. Or maybe, actually, it might be worth updating the order books. All right, so here's what we're looking at for Dodi, which is the third largest trade hub. Magnate Navy issue. I think I'm going to pass on that. But so here's you can see weird stuff happens, People do market manipulation, this is just not a very in-demand item in the first place, and so stuff gets weird sometimes. Pioneer Consortium issue. Now this is interesting. This is a brand new ship. And there is, ignore the period profit here because last week it was going to be bonkers because as soon as they came out, they were super, super expensive. All right, so that's probably good enough. So let's go through the process again here. All right, so we're back on Janus. I've pasted in everything from Guru. Hit submit. Way too much volume, way too much collat. People on public contracts, you could split this up into two and make two public contracts, but even then the volume's going to be weird, right? You don't want to go significantly over what a deep space transport's going to be able to do. So I often try to keep my Dodixie, Heck, and Wrens contracts to about 30,000 cubic meters. That way a DST pilot could potentially take two of them. Just a little tip there. And that seems to work out for me. All right, so some easy trims for volume and price. Let's drop an alligator. Let's drop an orthrus. All right, yeah, no, this is nice. So 33,000 cubic meters, 3 billion collateral. Sweet. So copy. Now let's go back to the client. All right, so we're going to repeat the process to multi-buy this stuff. And the order of operations I like to use is this. I'll go in, I'll open my multi-buy, add listed items in order. Let that start populating. We return to Janus. And now I click here on the sell price. That's going to give me my collateral. Now we go to the calculator. Collateral. And again, for whatever reason, this reads the decimal as white space, I think. So if you just leave that, watch what happens. Yeah, so it's assuming this is like 300 billion worth of stuff. So then if I put in number of jumps, 15, yeah, it's telling me to put in 4.5 billion in collateral. And I found that the volume doesn't really change things until you're getting up above DST levels. So yeah, let's take off those extraneous zeros. So Dodixie from Jita is 15 jumps through high sec. I have 3 billion in collateral. So here you can see pretty clearly, this is a nice illustration of the math it's using. It's taking 15 jumps times 3 billion collateral and saying, hey, pay 45 million on a public contract. That is insanely cheap for the amount of money I stand to make on this. And what I have found in the haulers channel is if I offer this and I put it up for 1-day acceptance, 1-day delivery, it often gets done within like 2 hours. I highly, highly recommend this. There's folks who do great work in the haulers channel. I've had one contract ever fail to deliver on time, and I've had it's less than 5% take longer than 5 or 6 hours. It's great. So we're going to go back to the Eve client. And here we are back in the Eve client. Our buy order, or our stuff that we're buying has been populated in multi-buy. So we're going to hit bonk. Dunk salvage drone. You know what? I was kind of iffy on the dunk salvage drone anyway. Let's just ignore that. It's not going to make a significant enough difference. All right. Also, even with all the buying and trading I do, even with stuff like event items that fluctuate wildly in price, I do leave those warning messages on because sometimes I get a little ADD and I'm not paying attention. All right, so we're going to right click all that. We're going to hit courier contract. This is a public courier contract. You can do it on behalf of your corporation, all sorts of fun stuff. You know how contracts work. All right, so now I'm going to have to go through because I selected all this stuff. I guess I could have done it through the assets window, but this guy has a bunch of weird assets. So, all right, there's my Pioneer Consortium, Hecate, Dramiel. And then I just keep an eye over here once, because I have had it happen where I've missed ships before, which is annoying, but it's not the end of the world. All right, so that's the correct volume, especially without those 10 salvage drones. So next, first thing I like to do, so that I don't forget, I still have that value on my clipboard. Just gonna paste that bad boy in there. Now I could probably and maybe should adjust it since I don't have those salvage drones, but it's honestly not enough to make a big difference. So in this instance, I'm not going to. All right, so then we're shipping it to Dodixie. That auto-populates because I've done it before. And I'm going to pay 45 million ISK. 3 million per jump. That's juicy for a space trucker. So somebody's going to want this contract. And I set it for 1 day to accept, 1 day to complete, because this is day trading. I need it there fast. And it will probably get there fast. I'm hoping that once I come through and make some edits, I'll be able to tell you exactly how fast this contract got completed. So, and then double check that, because I have almost done this before and flipped these two, and boy, is that a disaster. So let's talk about Eve Guru itself. Like I said, focusing today on the regional day trading module. This Fern Kitsuin, who is one of the two people behind Eve Guru, has said that this is the fastest way to make a lot of ISK. And I think he's not wrong, or at least this is easily one of the fastest ways to make major ISK, as I showed you at the very beginning here. The regional day trading module is expensive. It's $1 billion or $1 billion ISK a month. I'm making $1 billion ISK off of it a day. That said, I also probably have a lot more liquidity than many other people. However, it's not that difficult to, pick one trade hub, one of the secondary hubs, and, if you've got a few billion in liquidity that you can afford to float for a day or two, you can make good money. You don't have to target, this high-end stuff that I am necessarily. I didn't start by targeting the high-end stuff. So yeah, it's worth the $1 billion ISK if you're willing to do it, and if you're willing to, keep up with it. And you do have to update orders. I try not to update orders more than once or twice a day. Truth be told, for most things, if you're putting it up for 3 months and you could just leave it there, and I'm kind of getting to that point, it probably will sell unless it's some crazy market manipulation. It will eventually sell. I just came back from a significant break, and a lot of stuff I'd put up a few months ago had sold. Even, if I was being constantly undercut, the economy is constantly moving in this game. So, is it worth $1 billion ISK a month? Absolutely. I do have a referral code. That code is dronebay, all lowercase, all one word. You get 20% off your first month subscription if you use that. What I get from that is I don't get anything directly. I get a credit of 200 million ISK toward my own subscription. So that is Eve Guru. If you're interested in market trading, I highly recommend it. The station trading module is also really good. I don't like station trading as much myself, so I don't use it as much, especially not in JITA. I just don't have the patience for JITA. And the industry, this all started as an industry tool, and it's a really good industry tool. So that part of it, I can't speak as much to that because I don't use it as much, but maybe we'll have a video coming out on that once I get a little bit more experience with it. So a few tips, like I said, when you're using any tool, whether it's a spreadsheet you've made yourself, another free tool online, EveTrade.space went away, Eve Marketer went away, Eve Terminal went away. A lot of the free options are gone. And this is more powerful, I think, than those free options were. But a few things to keep an eye on. In secondary markets, construction materials are often iffy. Basic minerals often do well. So I'd be careful about construction components. I'd be careful about things that are easily built. It doesn't mean never do it. So things that cannot be manufactured, faction stuff, is often a really good way to go because the value is often pretty steady. In JITA, at least, you're not going to see as much fluctuation. It's often in demand, especially for things like doctrine fits, a lot of high-end PvE fits, stuff like that. And skill books, I often avoid. And don't buy a full day of supply most of the time, I would say. Now, I do believe that there are plans to adjust the default, where it says purchase units here. I believe they're planning on making it so that you can change the percentage of days of supply, because this number is just keep an eye on days of supply, and don't necessarily believe target demand per day is going to be predictable over time. Because like I said, I think it was one of the small rigs I saw earlier. I was like, oh, somebody bought the market out on that and didn't relist them. They're buying those 4 ships, but that's just a nice little gap in the market that I might be able to fill. So keep an eye out for stuff like that. You will start to notice trends over time. And for specific hubs, specific things can do better and worse. Like I was saying earlier, the Corpi and Senti stuff in Amar, that stuff drops in Amar. Or near Amar. So that might not be as safe of a bet. But the pith stuff that comes from Garista's dead space, that has to get moved to Amar. The only way that's getting there. So just some things to think about. Pay attention to trends. Mining barges and exhumers were doing very well for me for a while. Currently, some of the new stuff, the Pioneer Consortium, the Outriders are doing really well right now. So it's more than just looking at the numbers. It's about knowing what changes have happened or are about to happen. We might do a whole other video about speculation down the road. But, big green number doesn't necessarily mean click buy. So hopefully that helped. I had a couple of requests. Like I said, I have a referral code. There will be a link down in the description. You can use code dronebay to save 20% on your first month, and it'll help me pay for my subscriptions down the road. I also have a referral code for the Markee Dragon store, and as I record this, the Black Friday sales are live. That is 25% off of Omega, plus some Plex, and there's random Skinner stuff. Yay. But you get 25% off and you get free Plex out of the deal. It's a really good deal. We didn't know if they were going to do a good Black Friday sale because they had just done a couple of really good sales, but here we are. So if you go to the Markee Dragon store, there'll be a link below. You can use the code dronebay there as well, and you will save 3% off of your purchase price. And then I get a commission of 5%, and it doesn't cost you anything extra. So it helps you, helps me, helps Markee Dragon, that store has been around for years and years at this point. So yeah, those are really good ways to help the channel. But the easiest and most free way to help the channel is to like the video and subscribe. I am giving away an Odysseus in celebration of 1,000 subscribers. So you can head to the video that is going to be linked on the screen right now to go check out how to enter to win that Odysseus. It's also talking about Noir's new free port. There's also a link to the Noir Discord in the description if you want to join up and fly with some really fun space mercs. I think I've rambled enough. This is why I normally do scripted content. Anyway, until next time, good luck on the market and keep flying.